Elena Martinez had perfected the art of being invisible. At 28 years old, she could glide through a crowded ballroom carrying a tray of champagne glasses without a single person noticing her face. They'd take the drinks, sure. They'd even say thank you sometimes. But they never really looked at her. Not truly. And after 3 years of working galas and fancy events at the Grandstone Hotel, Elena had gotten used to it. Tonight was no different. Well, maybe it was a little different. This particular charity gala was bigger than most. The ballroom looked like something out of a movie, with massive crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling that probably cost more than Elena would make in 5 years. The marble floors were so polished she could see her reflection in them. And the guests? They were dressed to impress, that's for sure. Designer gowns that sparkled under the lights. Tuxedos that fit so perfectly they had to be custom-made. Jewelry that caught the light every time someone moved their hand. Elena adjusted her black uniform vest and picked up another tray of champagne from the service station. Her feet already hurt and it was only 8 o'clock. She still had 3 more hours to go. As she wove through the crowd, conversations drifted past her like background music. A woman with diamonds dripping from her ears was talking about her recent trip to the French Riviera. 2 men in expensive suits were debating stock options for some company Elena had never heard of. A younger couple was laughing about something that happened at another party last weekend. Nobody was talking about anything that mattered. At least not to Elena. She offered champagne to a group near the windows. They took the glasses without even glancing her way, too caught up in their conversation about vacation homes. One man was apparently buying his 3rd property in Aspen. His wife thought they should get something in the Hamptons instead. They went back and forth while Elena stood there holding the tray, waiting to see if anyone wanted a second glass. This was her life now. Serving people who had everything while she struggled to pay rent on her tiny studio apartment across town. But Elena tried not to think about that too much. Bitterness didn't help anyone, and she'd learned long ago that comparing your life to someone else's was a fast track to misery. These people had money. She didn't. That was just how the world worked sometimes. She moved toward the stage area where the real centerpiece of the ballroom waited. A gorgeous Steinway grand piano sat there under a spotlight, its black surface gleaming like still water. Just looking at it made Elena's chest tighten. She couldn't help herself. Even though she had dirty plates to clear from table 7 and champagne to refill at table 12, she stopped. Just for a moment. Just to look. The piano was beautiful, perfect. The kind of instrument she used to dream about playing on. The kind she'd imagined performing on in concert halls around the world. Back when she still believed that future was possible. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Elena had been 19 when she got the scholarship to the Metropolitan Conservatory of Music. Full ride. 4 years of intensive training with some of the best piano instructors in the country. She'd cried when she got the acceptance letter. Actually cried tears of joy. Right there in her mother's tiny kitchen while her mom hugged her and told her how proud she was. Piano had been Elena's entire world since she was 6 years old. Her grandmother had taught her the basics on an old upright that was missing 3 keys and always sounded a little out of tune. But Elena didn't care. She'd practice for hours, losing herself in the music, feeling like she could say things through the piano that she could never put into words. By the time she was in high school, she was winning competitions. Her teachers said she had a gift, a real talent that shouldn't be wasted, so when the conservatory offered her that scholarship, it felt like everything she'd worked for was finally coming together. She'd made it through 3 years, 3 amazing, exhausting, wonderful years of 12-hour practice sessions and music theory classes and performances that left her hands shaking and her heart racing. She was in her final year preparing for her senior recital when everything fell apart. Her mother got sick. Cancer. Stage 3, the kind that requires aggressive treatment and lots of it. Chemotherapy, radiation, hospital stays that lasted weeks, and bills. Oh God, the bills. They piled up faster than Elena could count them. Her mother had insurance, but it didn't cover everything. Not even close. Someone had to step up. Someone had to work. Someone had to make sure the rent got paid, and there was food in the fridge and the electricity stayed on. Her mother couldn't work anymore. She could barely get out of bed most days. So Elena made a choice. She dropped out of the conservatory 3 months before graduation. She took the first job she could find that paid decent money, and had flexible hours for hospital visits. That job happened to be at the Grandstone Hotel, serving drinks and clearing plates at fancy events for people who would never understand what it felt like to choose between your dreams and your family's survival. That was 3 years ago. Her mother was better now, thank goodness. The cancer was in remission. She was back to working part-time at the library, back to calling Elena twice a week to make sure she was eating properly and getting enough sleep, back to being her mom instead of a patient. But Elena's life had stayed frozen in that moment when she'd walked out of the conservatory for the last time. She told herself she'd go back eventually. Finish that last year, get her degree, but months turned into a year, then 2 years, then 3. The longer she stayed away, the harder it became to imagine going back, and she hadn't touched a piano since the day she left. Not once, she couldn't. It hurt too much. Excuse me. Could we get some more of those little appetizers with the shrimp? Elena snapped back to the present. A woman in a red gown was looking at her expectantly, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. Of course. I'll check with the kitchen right away, Elena said with a practiced smile. She headed back toward the service entrance, weaving through the crowd with her empty tray. As she pushed through the door into the harsh fluorescent lighting of the back hallway, she let the smile drop. Her face relaxed into something tired, something real. The other servers were bustling around, grabbing fresh trays, adjusting their uniforms, complaining about difficult guests. Elena joined them, falling back into the familiar rhythm of the work. This was her world now. The back hallways and service entrances, the kitchen chaos and the constant movement. The invisibility. But that piano was still out there on the stage, waiting. And later tonight, some famous pianist was supposed to play it for all those people who could afford the $500 tickets to this charity gala. Elena tried not to think about what that would feel like. Watching someone else live the dream she'd given up. She grabbed a fresh tray of appetizers and pushed back through the door into the glittering ballroom, ready to serve drinks and fade into the background once again. If only she'd known that in less than an hour. Everything was about to change. The first sign that something was wrong came at 8:30. Elena was clearing dessert. Plates from table 9 when she noticed the event coordinator practically running past her. The woman's face had gone pale, and she was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. That wasn't normal. The coordinator, Patricia something or other, was usually the picture of calm professionalism. Elena had worked enough events to know that coordinators didn't run unless something had gone seriously wrong. She watched as Patricia disappeared backstage, her high heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. Wonder what that's about, muttered Tony, one of the other servers, as he passed by with a tray of coffee cups. Elena shrugged and kept working. Whatever it wasn't her problem. She had her own job to worry about. But over the next 10 minutes, the atmosphere in the ballroom started to shift. More staff members were rushing around backstage. Patricia emerged looking even more stressed, if that was possible, and immediately cornered the hotel manager. They had an intense whispered conversation, both of them glancing repeatedly at the stage where that beautiful piano sat waiting. The guests were starting to notice too. Conversations were interrupted by curious glances toward all the commotion. A few people checked their watches. The evening's main performance was supposed to start at 9 o'clock, and it was already 8:45. Elena delivered another round of after-dinner drinks, her curiosity getting the better of her. She made sure to pass close enough to the stage area to catch bits and pieces of the panicked discussions happening there. "No, I understand, but we need someone here now," Patricia was saying into her phone, her voice tight with stress. "The entire evening was built around this performance. We have 300 guests here who paid specifically to see her play. Her. That must be Victoria Chen," Elena thought, the famous pianist who was supposed to be tonight's featured performer. Elena had seen her name on the event posters when she'd arrived for her shift. Some kind of child prodigy turned international concert star. The tickets for this gala had cost $500 each, and a huge part of that price tag was the chance to hear Victoria Chen play live. Patricia hung up and turned to the foundation director, a silver-haired woman named Mrs. Whitmore, who'd been organizing this charity event for months. Even from several feet away, Elena could see the devastation on Patricia's face. "She's not coming," Patricia said, and her voice cracked slightly. There was an accident. A car ran a red light and hit her vehicle on the interstate. "She's okay, thank God, just shaken up and bruised." but the paramedics won't let her leave the hospital yet. She's at least 2 hours away, and that's if they release her tonight at all. Mrs. Whitmore closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Well, I suppose we need to make an announcement. Elena felt a pang of sympathy for both women. She might just be a server, but she'd worked enough events to understand how much planning went into something like this. Months of preparation, thousands of dollars spent on promotion and venue costs, hundreds of guests with high expectations, and now the main attraction wasn't going to show up. She watched as the foundation director made her way to the stage and picked up the microphone. The room gradually fell silent as people realized an announcement was coming. Good evening again, everyone, Mrs. Whitmore said, her smile brave but strained. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Our featured performer for this evening, Victoria Chen, has been involved in a minor car accident. A collective gasp went through the room. She's perfectly fine, Mrs. Whitmore quickly added, raising her hands, just a bit shaken up. But out of an abundance of caution, she's been taken to the hospital for evaluation and won't be able to join us tonight. The disappointment in the room was palpable. People started murmuring to each other. A few pulled out their phones. Elena saw several guests exchange glances that clearly said they were ready to leave. We hope you'll still enjoy the rest of your evening, Mrs. Whitmore continued, her voice fighting to stay upbeat. We have wonderful desserts being served, and the bar will remain open. Your generous donations tonight are going to help provide music education to hundreds of children who otherwise wouldn't have access to lessons or instruments. It was a good try. A valiant effort. But Elena could see it wasn't working. The energy in the room had completely deflated. This was a charity gala, sure, but people had also come to be entertained, to experience something special, and now that special thing was gone. As Mrs. Whitmore left the stage, Elena noticed people starting to gather their things, putting on jackets, making excuses to the people at their tables. The early exit had begun. Near the stage, Patricia was on her phone again, desperately trying to find a replacement performer. Elena could hear fragments of the conversations as she cleared more tables. Yes, I know it's last minute. I'm asking anyway. No, I understand you're in Boston, that's too far. Please, if you know anyone at all who could... It was painful to watch. Patricia made call after call, each one ending in disappointment. Most professional pianists were already booked for Saturday night performances. The few who weren't available were too far away to make it in time. By 9:15, at least 50 guests had left. The donations had stalled completely. Mrs. Whitmore stood near the piano with her hands pressed to her face, and Elena could tell she was fighting back tears. This foundation was her life's work. This gala was supposed to be the biggest fundraiser of the year, and it was falling apart. Elena continued working, but she couldn't stop looking at that piano. It just sat there silent and waiting. Such a beautiful instrument, and now nobody was going to play it. All these people dressed up with nowhere to go. All this money that wasn't going to be raised for kids who needed it. Her chest felt tight. Her hands started to tremble slightly as she loaded dirty plates onto her tray. She knew that feeling. She'd felt it before. Years ago, every time she'd performed. It was nerves mixed with excitement mixed with something else. Something that felt a lot like calling. No, she couldn't. That was crazy. Elena forced herself to focus on her work. She was a server. She served drinks and cleared plates and stayed invisible. That was her job, her role, her place in this world. But the piano kept pulling at her, and the disappointed faces of the guests kept nagging at her, and Mrs. Whitmore's devastated expression kept breaking her heart. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she'd played. 3 years since she'd even let herself think about performing. She probably couldn't do it anymore. She was rusty, out of practice. She'd embarrass herself, and yet her feet started moving before her brain fully caught up with what she was doing. She set down her tray on an empty table. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands felt cold and sweaty at the same time. She walked toward Patricia, who was slumped against the side of the stage, her phone finally silent in her lap. The woman looked defeated, exhausted. "Excuse me," Elena said quietly. Patricia looked up, clearly not in the mood for whatever a server needed to ask her. Elena swallowed hard. This was insane. This was the craziest thing she'd ever done. But the words came out anyway. "I can play." Patricia stared at her blankly. "What? The piano?" "I can play it. If you need someone." For a long moment, Patricia just looked at her. Really looked at her. Taking in the server's uniform, the sensible non-slip shoes, the name tag that said Elena in plain letters. Taking in this random hotel employee who was claiming she could fill in for an internationally renowned concert pianist. "You can play piano," Patricia said slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "Yes. I went to the Metropolitan Conservatory. I was 3 months from graduating before I had to leave. I know it sounds crazy, but I can do this. I think. Maybe. If you're desperate enough." Patricia's eyes flickered with something. Not quite hope, but maybe the faint shadow of it. The tiny possibility that this disaster could somehow be saved. "What would you play?" she asked. "Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. The first movement. It's about 15 minutes. I had it memorized for my senior recital." Patricia stood up slowly. She looked at Elena for another long moment, clearly trying to decide if this was the worst idea she'd ever heard, or if she was desperate enough to try it. Finally, she said, "Okay. God help us both, but okay." The next 5 minutes passed in a blur. Patricia was suddenly all business, her despair replaced by focused energy. She pulled Mrs. Whitmore aside and explained the situation in hushed, urgent tones. The foundation director's eyes went wide as she looked over at Elena, then back at Patricia, then at Elena again. "You're serious?" Mrs. Whitmore asked, walking over to where Elena stood. "You can actually play?" Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Her throat felt tight. "Do you have performance experience? Have you played for audiences before?" "Yes, competitions mostly, and recitals at the conservatory. The biggest was about 200 people." Elena paused. "But that was 3 years ago." Mrs. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Elena could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. This was a huge risk. If Elena froze up there, or if she played badly, it would be worse than having no performance at all. It would be embarrassing for everyone involved. But what choice did they have? "All right," Mrs. Whitmore finally said. "Let's do it." Patricia, make the announcement. "And you?" She looked at Elena kindly. "What's your name?" "Elena. Elena Martinez. Elena, do you need a few minutes to prepare? To warm up?" Elena looked at the piano. Her hands were already trembling. "No, if I think about it too much, I'll lose my nerve. I just need to sit down and play." "Brave girl," Mrs. Whitmore said softly. Then louder, "Patricia, let's get this started before we lose any more guests." Patricia took the microphone again. The conversations in the room quieted down, though not as quickly as before. People looked tired, ready to leave. Several were already standing with their coats on. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just one more moment." Patricia's voice rang out across the ballroom. "We have a wonderful surprise for you. While Victoria Chen cannot be with us tonight, we're fortunate to have another very talented pianist here who has graciously offered to perform for us." Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward the stage area, toward her, still in her server's uniform, still holding her name tag, still looking like she belonged in the kitchen, not on a stage. The confusion on people's faces was obvious. A few guests exchanged glances that clearly said, "Who is this person?" "Please welcome Elena Martinez to the stage." This was it. No turning back now. Elena's legs felt like they were made of water as she climbed the 3 steps up to the stage platform. The spotlight hit her immediately, bright and hot. She could barely see the audience beyond it, which was probably a good thing. If she could see all those skeptical faces clearly, she might turn around and run. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever. Each step echoed in her ears. She was aware of everything. The way her sensible work shoes looked against the polished stage floor, the murmur of confused voices from the audience, the massive chandelier overhead that scattered light across everything. She reached the piano and stood there for a second, just looking at it. The bench, the keys, the music stand, empty because she wouldn't need sheet music. She had this piece living inside her memory. Elena sat down and adjusted the bench height. Her hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice taking over. She positioned herself back straight, shoulders relaxed, hands hovering over the keys. Then she made the mistake of looking out at the audience. 300 faces stared back at her. Some curious, some skeptical, some clearly annoyed that they were being asked to stay for this. In the front row, she could see a man checking his phone. A woman was whispering to her husband, probably asking who this random server girl thought she was. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were sweating. What was she thinking? She couldn't do this. She hadn't practiced in 3 years. 3 years. She was going to humiliate herself. She was going to crash and burn in front of all these people, and she'd probably lose her job and become a cautionary tale that other servers told each other about. Staying in your lane. Her fingers touched the keys but didn't press down. She froze. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Waiting. Elena closed her eyes. And suddenly, she wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She was in her mother's hospital room, sitting beside her bed during one of the long nights when the chemo made it impossible for her mom to sleep. Her mother had been so weak then, so tired, but she'd reached out and taken Elena's hand. "I miss hearing you play," her mom had whispered. "That's the only thing I really miss. Your music. You used to fill the whole apartment with it." "I'm sorry, Mom," Elena had said, fighting back tears. "I know you wanted me to finish school. Stop that." Her mother had squeezed her hand with what little strength she had. "You made the right choice. You took care of me. That's what matters. The music will still be there when you're ready for it." Elena had nodded, but she hadn't believed it. How could the music still be there? She'd walked away. She'd chosen something else. And once you made a choice like that, you couldn't just go back and pretend nothing had changed, except maybe her mother had been right. Maybe the music had been waiting. Waiting for Elena to be ready. Waiting for a moment exactly like this one. She opened her eyes. Her fingers found the keys and she began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the ballroom. Soft at first, tentative like the music was waking up after a long sleep. Elena's hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The patterns. The timing. The way this piece moved like water flowing from one phrase to the next. And then something incredible happened. The fear disappeared. Everything disappeared except the music. The skeptical faces, the fancy ballroom, the fact that she was wearing a server's uniform, none of it mattered anymore. There was only the piano and the sound it made, and the way Elena's hands knew exactly where to go next. The piece started to build. Rachmaninoff had written this concerto when he was struggling with depression, when he thought he'd never write music again. Elena had always connected with that story. The idea that you could lose yourself and find yourself again through music. Her hands moved across the keys with increasing confidence. The romantic, sweeping melody poured out into the ballroom. This wasn't just notes on a page. This was 3 years of grief and sacrifice and stubbornness. This was every time she'd walked past a music store and forced herself not to look in the window. Every time she'd heard a piano playing somewhere and had to swallow the ache in her chest. Every single moment she'd told herself she was fine. She'd made her peace with giving up her dreams. All of it came out through the music. She attacked the more aggressive passages with a ferocity that surprised even her. Her fingers flew over the keys, powerful and precise. Then the music would soften again, becoming tender and vulnerable. And Elena would lean into those moments too, letting them breathe. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she was aware that the ballroom had gone completely silent. No one was talking. No one was moving. But that awareness was distant, like something happening in another world. Right now, Elena was exactly where she was meant to be. The piece demanded everything from her. Technically, it was brutal. There were passages that required perfect timing, perfect finger placement, perfect dynamics. But Elena had lived with this concerto for months when she was preparing for her senior recital. She'd practiced it until her hands cramped. She'd played it in her sleep, and somehow, impossibly, it was all still there. Her hands knew what to do. Her body remembered how to move with the music. And her heart, the part of her that she'd tried so hard to shut down 3 years ago, remembered why she'd fallen in love with piano in the first place. This was what it felt like to be fully alive. The music swelled toward its climax. Elena's whole body was engaged now. Leaning into the dramatic chords, her hands stretched across the keys in wide intervals. The sound filled every corner of the massive ballroom, bouncing off the marble floors and the crystal chandeliers. And then, just as powerfully as it had built up, the music began to soften. The final phrases were delicate, almost fragile. Elena played them with such tenderness that she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The last notes hung in the air for a moment, pure and clear. Then silence. Elena's hands remained on the keys, unable to quite believe it was over. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Slowly, almost afraid of what she'd find, she lifted her head and looked out at the audience. Every single person was staring at her, frozen, silent. For one horrible second, Elena thought she'd made a terrible mistake. They hated it. They were appalled that some random server had dared to perform. Then someone in the back started clapping, and then someone else joined in, and then the entire ballroom erupted. People weren't just applauding, they were on their feet. All of them. A standing ovation that thundered through the room. Some people were wiping their eyes. Others were shouting, "Brava!" Elena stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky, her hands still trembling. She couldn't quite process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But it was. Mrs. Whitmore rushed onto the stage and pulled Elena into a tight hug. The older woman was crying, actually crying and laughing at the same time. "That was extraordinary," she said into Elena's ear. "Absolutely extraordinary." The applause kept going. It wouldn't stop. Elena looked out at all those faces and they weren't skeptical anymore. They weren't checking their phones or whispering to each other. They were celebrating her. For the first time in 3 years, Elena felt like herself again. The applause wouldn't stop. Elena stood on the stage, still trying to catch her breath, still trying to understand what had just happened. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. And 300 people were on their feet, clapping so hard it felt like the chandelier above might shake loose. Mrs. Whitmore was still beside her, one hand on Elena's shoulder like she was afraid Elena might disappear if she let go. The foundation director was beaming, tears streaming down her face, completely unbothered by the fact that her mascara was running. "Take a bow, sweetheart," Mrs. Whitmore whispered. "They're not going to stop until you do." Elena felt like she was moving through a dream as she stepped forward and bowed. The applause somehow got even louder. People were whistling now, cheering. She could see faces in the crowd and they were smiling. Really smiling. Not the polite, forced smiles she'd gotten used to seeing when she served them drinks. These were genuine smiles. Amazed smiles. When she straightened up, Mrs. Whitmore handed her a microphone. Elena stared at it like it might bite her. "Tell them your story," Mrs. Whitmore said softly. "They need to hear it." Elena's mind went blank. Her story? What story? She was just a server who used to play piano. That was it. Nothing special. Nothing worth telling 300 wealthy strangers about. But Mrs. Whitmore was looking at her with such encouragement, such warmth that Elena found herself raising the microphone to her lips. "Hi," she said, and her voice cracked. The applause finally started to die down as people settled back into their seats, still watching her with rapt attention. "I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. To any of this." A few people laughed, but it was kind laughter. Encouraging. "My name is Elena Martinez, and up until about 20 minutes ago, I was serving you champagne and clearing your plates." More laughter. "I wasn't supposed to be up here. This wasn't the plan." She paused, trying to figure out what to say next. The ballroom was completely silent now, waiting. "I went to the Metropolitan Conservatory of Music on a full scholarship, piano performance. It was everything I'd ever wanted. I'd been playing since I was 6 years old, and music was my whole life. My whole world. I was going to graduate and perform and maybe teach someday. I had it all planned out." Elena's throat tightened. This was harder than playing had been. But in my senior year, my mom got sick, cancer, and suddenly all those plans didn't matter anymore. Someone had to pay the bills. Someone had to be there for the doctor's appointments and the chemo sessions and the really hard nights. So I left school 3 months before graduation. I took the first job I could find that paid decent money. She gestured to her server's uniform, and several people in the audience nodded with understanding. That was 3 years ago. My mom's okay now, thank God. She's been in remission for over a year. But I never went back to music. I told myself I would eventually, but eventually kept getting further and further away. And honestly, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I'd made my choice and that was that. Elena looked at the piano behind her, then back at the audience. But then tonight happened, and I saw this beautiful instrument just sitting here, and I saw all of you disappointed because the performance got canceled, and I saw Mrs. Whitmore, who's worked so hard on this fundraiser, looking heartbroken, and something inside me just said, "You have to try." Her voice got quieter, more vulnerable. "I haven't touched a piano in 3 years. I was terrified I wouldn't remember how, or that I'd remember but my hands wouldn't work anymore. or that I'd get up here and completely fall apart. She laughed, but it was shaky. I still can't quite believe I actually did it. You were magnificent, someone called out from the audience, and several people clapped in agreement. Elena felt her eyes getting hot with tears. Thank you. That means more than you know, but I'm telling you all this because I think it matters. What we're raising money for tonight, it matters. Music education isn't just about learning to play an instrument. It's about having a voice when you can't find the words. It's about expressing things that are too big or too complicated to say out loud. It's about hope. She thought about all those kids out there who wanted to learn music but whose families couldn't afford lessons. Kids who might have the same gift she'd been given but who'd never get the chance to develop it. I got lucky. Someone gave me a scholarship. Someone believed I was worth investing in, and even though I had to walk away from it for a while, that gift never left me. It was still there, waiting. And tonight it gave me a second chance. Elena's voice cracked again. Every child deserves that kind of chance. Every kid who loves music should get to learn it, regardless of whether their parents can afford private lessons or fancy instruments. The room was absolutely still. She could see people leaning forward in their seats, completely focused on every word. So that's why I'm up here, not because I'm special or because I'm trying to replace someone as talented as Victoria Chen. I'm up here because I believe in what this foundation does, and I wanted you to see why it matters. Music saved my life once, and maybe, just maybe, it can save someone else's too. Elena lowered the microphone, unsure of what else to say. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a man in the front row stood up. He was wearing an expensive suit and looked like the kind of person who ran a Fortune 500 company. He pulled out his phone and held it up. I want to pledge $50,000, he announced loudly. Right now. For this program. Because what I just witnessed was exactly why we need to give more kids access to music education. The ballroom erupted again, but this time it wasn't just applause. People were pulling out their phones, raising their hands, calling out numbers. 25,000, 15,000 here. We'll match whatever the Johnsons pledged. Mrs. Whitmore looked like she might faint. Patricia was frantically typing on her tablet, trying to keep track of all the pledges coming in. The foundation's assistant director rushed to grab a microphone to help coordinate everything. Elena stood there in shock as the donations poured in. This wasn't because of her playing, she realized. It was because people had connected with the story, with the struggle, with the idea that music could be a lifeline for someone who needed it. Within 15 minutes, Mrs. Whitmore announced that they'd exceeded their fundraising goal by over $90,000. The room erupted in cheers, but the surprises weren't over. An elderly woman made her way slowly to the stage. She moved with the careful grace of someone who'd lived a long, full life. Elena recognized her vaguely from earlier in the evening. She'd been sitting at one of the VIP tables near the front. My dear, the woman said, her voice warm and cultured. That was one of the most moving performances I've witnessed in 40 years of attending concerts. I'm Catherine Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore's mother-in-law. I used to perform professionally myself back in the day. It's an honor to meet you, Elena said, still feeling overwhelmed by everything. I run a small arts foundation, Catherine continued. We provide scholarships for musicians who show exceptional promise. I would very much like to offer you a full scholarship to return to the conservatory and complete your degree. With a stipend for living expenses, of course, so you don't have to work while you study. Elena's mouth fell open. She couldn't have heard that right. I'm sorry, what? Catherine smiled. You have a rare gift, my dear, and you've already proven you have the discipline and the heart to match the talent. It would be a crime to let that go to waste. What do you say? Elena couldn't speak, couldn't think. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Servers didn't play one impromptu performance and get their dreams handed back to them. She started, but her voice failed. You don't have to answer right now, Catherine said kindly. Think about it. Here's my card. Call me this week and we'll work out the details. Before Elena could respond, a man in his 50s approached with his own business card. I'm Robert Chen. I manage several performance artists. I'd love to talk to you about some concert opportunities. Small venues at first, but I think we could build something special. Then Patricia was there, looking sheepish and amazed at the same time. I know I'm just the event coordinator, but I want to apologize for doubting you. And I want to offer you a position as the Grandstone's featured musician for special events. Much better pay than serving. And you'd actually get to perform. Elena looked around at all these people, all these opportunities, all these open doors that had been slammed shut 3 years ago. Her head was spinning. Her heart was so full it hurt. She caught sight of Daniela and Tony and the other servers watching from the edge of the ballroom. They were grinning and giving her thumbs up. Her people. The ones who understood what it meant to work hard and stay invisible and keep pushing forward even when life knocked you down. Thank you. Elena finally managed to say to everyone crowded around her. Thank you all so much. I need some time to process all of this, but thank you. As the crowd began to disperse, heading back to their tables to enjoy the rest of the evening, Elena stood alone on the stage for just a moment. She looked out at the ballroom, at the piano, at the life she'd thought was gone forever, and she smiled because sometimes the thing you think you've lost is just waiting for the right moment to come back to you. The gala didn't end until nearly midnight, and Elena spent most of that time in a daze. People kept approaching her. Wealthy donors who wanted to shake her hand. Musicians who'd been in the audience and wanted to talk technique. Even some of the other servers came up during their breaks to congratulate her, though most of them looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Girl, what just happened? Daniela whispered when she found Elena near the dessert table, still holding the folder of business cards and contact information that had been thrust into her hands. 1 minute you're refilling water glasses, the next you're like, I don't know, a concert pianist.
How did I not know you could do that?
Elena laughed, and it came out a little hysterical. I didn't know I could still do it either. Honestly, I thought I'd forgotten everything. Well, you definitely didn't forget. That was insane. In a good way. In the best way. Daniela hugged her tight. I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. Those words hit Elena harder than she expected. You deserve this, did she? She'd always felt like she was just getting by, just surviving. The idea that she deserved something good, something extraordinary, felt foreign. But maybe Daniela was right. Maybe she did deserve it. The hotel manager found Elena before she could leave that night. Mr. Jameson was a stern man who rarely smiled, but he was smiling now. Miss Martinez, I have to say, in 20 years of managing this hotel, I've never seen anything quite like what you did tonight. Patricia told me about the scholarship offer and the other opportunities that came your way. I assume you'll be leaving us? Elena's stomach dropped. She hadn't even thought about that. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cause any problems. I can still work my shifts until you find a replacement, I promise. Mr. Jameson held up his hand. You misunderstand. I'm not upset. I'm grateful. You saved an incredibly important event for one of our best clients. The foundation is already talking about hosting their next gala here because of what happened tonight. What I'm trying to say is thank you, and whatever path you choose next, you have our full support. He handed her an envelope. 2 weeks severance pay even though you're not being let go. Consider it a thank you gift, and a good luck fund for whatever comes next. Elena took the envelope with shaking hands. Thank you. This job, it meant a lot to me. Everyone here has been kind. You brought something special to this place even before tonight. That doesn't go unnoticed. He nodded once, then walked away, leaving Elena standing there with tears in her eyes for what felt like the 100th time that evening. By the time Elena finally left the grandstone, it was almost 1 a.m. She walked to the bus stop in her server's uniform, her practical shoes clicking against the sidewalk, but her purse was full of business cards and possibilities. The night air was cool and helped clear her head. She sat on the bench waiting for the late bus and pulled out her phone. She had 17 missed calls and about 40 text messages. Most were from her mom. The first text had come in around 9:30. Mija, my friend Rosa just called me. Her daughter was at some fancy gala at the Grandstone tonight and she said she saw you playing piano on stage. Please call me. I'm confused. The messages got progressively more excited and concerned as the night went on. The most recent one, sent just 10 minutes ago, said, Elena Lucia Martinez, if you don't call me right now, I'm driving down there myself. Rosa showed me a video someone posted. What is happening? Elena smiled and hit the call button. Her mom picked up on the first ring. Finally. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? Rosa sends me this video of you playing Rachmaninoff in front of hundreds of people, and you're wearing your work uniform, and I thought I was losing my mind. Tell me everything. Right now, so Elena did. She told her mom the whole story while sitting at that bus stop, waiting for a bus that seemed to be running late. She talked about Victoria Chen's accident and the desperate coordinator, and the moment of crazy courage when she'd volunteered to play. She described what it felt like to sit at that piano again after 3 years. The fear, the joy, the way her hands had remembered even when her mind had doubted. And she told her about the scholarship offer, the performance opportunities, all the doors that had suddenly swung open. Her mother was crying by the end of it. Elena could hear her sniffling on the other end of the line. "Mom, don't cry. This is a good thing. I know it's a good thing, you silly girl. These are happy tears. I'm just so proud of you I could burst. And also a little bit angry with myself. Why would you be angry? Because you gave up the conservatory for me. Because I let you do that. I should have fought harder, found another way." Elena's own eyes filled with tears again. "Mom, no, don't think that. I made the right choice. You needed me and I was there. I don't regret that. Not for a second. But you lost 3 years, I didn't lose them. I just used them differently. I learned things at that job. About people, about myself, about what matters. And maybe I needed those 3 years to really understand what music means to me. Maybe I wouldn't have played the way I did tonight if I hadn't walked away first." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best." They talked for another 20 minutes, making plans for Elena to visit that weekend so they could discuss everything properly. Her mom wanted to meet Catherine Whitmore in person, to make sure the scholarship offer was legitimate and that Elena wouldn't be taken advantage of. Elena loved her for that protective instinct, even though she was 28 years old. The bus finally arrived, nearly empty at this time of night. Elena found a seat near the back and stared out the window as the city rolled past. The buildings, the streetlights, the occasional person walking home late from work or a night out. This was her city. She'd been born here, grown up here, struggled here, and now it felt like she was seeing it with new eyes. Everything looked different, fuller somehow, more alive with possibility. When she finally got back to her tiny studio apartment, Elena was exhausted. She kicked off her shoes, hung up her uniform, and collapsed onto her bed, still fully dressed. But she couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing too fast. She pulled out all the business cards in the folder Catherine Whitmore had given her with scholarship information. She spread them across her bed and just looked at them. Physical proof that tonight had really happened. The card from Robert Chen, the performance manager. He'd talked about starting with small concert halls and building up to bigger venues. He'd mentioned touring possibilities, recording opportunities, things that seemed impossible for a girl who'd been clearing plates just hours ago. The scholarship packet from Catherine's foundation. Full tuition for her final year at the conservatory. A monthly stipend of $1,500 for living expenses. Access to practice rooms and performance spaces. Everything she'd need to finish what she'd started 3 years ago. Patricia's offer to become the hotel's featured musician. Good pay, flexible hours, a chance to perform regularly while she completed her degree. It was overwhelming. All of it. Too much good news at once for someone who'd gotten used to just getting by. Elena picked up her phone and opened her photos. She scrolled back 3 years to pictures from the conservatory. There she was at 19, 20, 21, smiling in practice rooms, performing in recitals, looking so young and hopeful and completely certain that the world was going to work out exactly as planned. Life had other plans, of course. It usually did. But looking at those old photos now, Elena realized something. That girl in the pictures, she was still here. She'd been here all along, just waiting for the right moment. Waiting for Elena to be brave enough to reach for her again. She set down her phone and walked to the window. Her apartment was on the 4th floor and didn't have much of a view. Just other buildings and a slice of street below. But tonight, looking out that window, Elena felt like she could see forever. Tomorrow, she'd call Catherine Whitmore and accept the scholarship. She'd meet with Robert Chen to discuss performance opportunities. She'd talk to Patricia about the hotel position and figure out how to balance everything. Tomorrow, she'd start building the life she'd thought she'd lost, but tonight, right now, she just wanted to sit with this feeling. This strange, wonderful, terrifying feeling of having dreamed something impossible and watched it come true. Elena thought about all those kids who'd benefit from the money raised tonight. Kids who loved music but didn't have access to it. Kids who needed someone to believe in them the way people had believed in her. Maybe that was the real gift of tonight. Not just the opportunities that had come her way, but the reminder that music could change lives. That taking a chance on someone could mean everything. that it was never too late to find your way back to the thing that made you feel most alive. She pulled out her phone one more time and sent a text to her mother. "I'm going to do it, Mom. All of it. I'm going back to the conservatory. I'm going to finish what I started. And I'm going to make you proud." Her mother's response came back almost immediately. "Misha, I was always proud. But I'm so happy you're choosing yourself this time. Go play your heart out. The world needs to hear your music." Elena smiled and set her phone down. She walked into the bathroom to finally wash off the makeup that had somehow survived the entire emotional roller coaster of the evening. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Same face, same dark eyes, same hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But something was different. Something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just Elena the server anymore. She wasn't just Elena the girl who'd given up her dreams for her family. She was Elena the pianist. Elena the performer. Elena the person who'd taken the biggest risk of her life and watched it pay off in ways she never could have imagined. And tomorrow, when she woke up, she'd start living like it. But for now, as she finally crawled into bed and pulled the covers up, Elena let herself feel proud. Really, truly proud of the courage it had taken to walk onto that stage. Proud of the performance she'd given. Proud of choosing hope over fear. Sometimes the thing that changes your life isn't planned. It isn't expected. It's just a moment when you decide to be brave, to take a chance, to remember who you really are beneath all the compromises and survival strategies. For Elena, that moment had come while wearing a server's uniform in a ballroom full of strangers, and it had changed everything.